Hi, welcome to Little Pieces Club Ministries podcast. My name is Chris Polad. I'm known as Mr. Chris to the kids at Little Pieces Club small groups. I'm a Bible nerd, a child of divorce, and author, and I created Little Pieces Club Ministries around the idea that when our hearts break, God can still make works of art from the broken pieces. I run small groups for children and teens and consult with and support parents. I also give lectures and seminars on request. The content centers around the science of adversity, abuse, and neglect, or ACE science, and how biblical design patterns harmonize with it. We are non-doctrinal and base our teachings on biblical scholarship. And along the way of this path, I discovered that Jesus' story, wrapped in the design patterns of the Good Shepherd and Tree of Life, help us process, grieve, forgive, and reintegrate our souls after trauma and relational toxicity. This helps us grow strong in solitude and community, and leading us and helps us love God, self, and others, which happen to be the most important blessings we can experience and give. The podcast is geared to help parents understand their children's point of view and to be a good shepherd and tree of life through the hard times. I've started a new series of short videos called God Questions in Context with Dr. Chris. I tweet this out and share it on Instagram, and it can be found on our YouTube channel. You can connect with us at www.littlepiecesclub.com. You can send us an email at littlepiecesministries@gmail.com, and then follow us on socials at LPC Ministries for Instagram, at Club Pieces on Twitter, and at Little Pieces Club on TikTok. We also have a YouTube video channel to look at all of our small groups and the videos that accompany the podcasts. We also have a Facebook site as well. So now let's get into this week's episode. This week marks our third part of our Parent FAQs series and is Season 2, Episode 11. As we've been saying with each one of these podcasts, context matters. So we need to look at the context of the greater family, the immediate family, and then also our modern and ancient contexts. So as I always say with Little Pieces Ministries, we're committed to uncovering the synergy between modern adversity science and deep biblical design patterns that help us handle the adversity in life. And the design patterns that we focus on are the Good Shepherd and the Tree of Life. And this helps us, reminds us that we kind of go through life as lost sheep who are then rescued by Jesus, and then we can become trees of life. And along that way, there are certain skills that we can use to help us. And then in a slide that I often throw in here, grief and forgiveness is sort of central in our suffering as we go through life, so that we can overcome shame that we feel and realize that we're never alone. And we have multiple skills that we talk about in LPC that are broken into the private Christian journey and the public Christian journey. That's not an exhaustive list by any means, but things that I've uncovered over the years that help us live and thrive. And then lastly, we also keep in mind the idea of attachment. And this is the deep emotional bond that we make with other people. And the attachment can be the classic attachments that we deal with are either secure or insecure. And I think using the Good Shepherd concept, there's actually a wise attachment. And that is having the ability to discern who are safe and unsafe people, and then being able to make good emotional bonds with those people. Because wrapped up in the Good Shepherd concept is the ability to discern bad sheep and bad shepherds, and good sheep and good shepherds. And so some grow up with secure attachment, and this could honestly be a little bit unsafe in the ability to think that everyone is safe to attach to. But then for the insecure attachments, you also kind of run the risk of the other side, which is you don't attach to anybody, and so you can never feel fully in community. So those are the things that are kind of rolling around as we enter into this specific case that we're going to talk about today. So I was walking with a mom several years ago who had recently filed for divorce, and she was then dealing with her 13-year-old son being violent towards her. And so she wondered what to do. So we are going to break down the various steps of this case and hopefully see a little bit of universal wisdom there to help us through the rest of this. So if you have a violent child, the first thing that we have to think about is what to do in the moment. And of course, personal safety for parents and children, the other children in the home, is important. So get to safety, and if need be, in a locked room. And what this does is it, number one, protects you, but also if something about you is triggering this violent outburst, if you get out of sight, they may remit and calm down. And try to make sure that you have a phone with you if you have to lock yourself in a room, and then be able to call for help with either a trusted, reliable friend. The ex-spouse may need to come over if you're at a place in the relationship where you can trust them to take care of this, or if it is severe enough, you may need to call 911 to have the police step in to help de-escalate things. And if you do know of like local, what's going on with local policing, they are embedding social workers more and more in their responses. So it may be a quick way to have a social worker on the scene if your police department is doing that type of thing. And then a little bit out of the safety situation is called respite care. Sometimes kids in the divorce setting are just so distraught that they really don't feel safe with either parent. And so there is something called respite care where the kids can spend a night or two not in an institution, but in a place that is specifically designed to give them respite care. And this does kind of dovetail a bit with the idea of Sabbath. So it's not completely out of the ancient wisdom tradition either. Okay, so once you're out of the immediate situation, I kind of encourage you to think about Stephen Covey's habit of seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I tend to remind adults in this situation that you are the adult. So you have had a child who has become violent. And yes, I absolutely know that that's going to be very, very upsetting. But you have to kind of pivot very quickly once you're safe to the questions about why did this happen? And this, of course, comes with context. So once the acute situation is dealt with, and by the way, violence is not okay. What we're doing with this podcast is deconstructing the violence to find a way to deal with it. And eventually the messaging moving forward will be that we need to avoid the violence because of all of the problems that it causes. So not even though I'm sort of getting into the mindset of what's going on with the children, don't mistake this for the fact that violence is not okay. So seeing things from the eyes of the child in no way justifies the violence at all. And so we'll get to planning for the future and coming up with different tools in the psychological toolbox for working through the triggers to the anger. So what might help is to remind yourself that if a child has gone to this much anger that has caused violence against someone in the family, that very, very likely that underneath all of that is a very hurt and ashamed child. And this is no matter how big a teenager they've become. Just be very curious and investigate what could be driving the hurt and the shame. So in divorces with parents running very high and living situations changing, it's very difficult to get out of your own head for a moment, but hopefully this podcast will allow you to form a structure about how to do that. And so one of the things that I want you to do is to think back over the course of the child's life. How much anger and perhaps violence has he witnessed? And this is going to come in the verbal fights or some type of reaction that he might have seen from one or both parents. And so this is a time for honesty and not wishful thinking. So don't impulsively and reflexively just say, well, I don't think anything, but really, really think back and admit to yourself if he has witnessed one or both parents being either verbally or physically abusive. And so even with the shut door, if there was yelling and loud thumps and maybe bruises, that this is exposure to anger and violence, and thus has primed him to speak, so to speak, with a voice of anger and violence. The next thing you want to think about is who is driving the divorce? Is it mom or dad? And in the situation that we're talking about today, the mom, as I said, had filed for divorce. And so in a very simple way, no matter the reason for the divorce, because that's tied up into kind of complicated adult thinking, the parent who is filing for divorce might be initially blamed by the child, and that then kind of drives some of the anger that you may be seeing. And also remember that anger is part of the grieving process. And one of the things that we talk about often and is running in the background is kids need to be led through the grieving process. And so that's an aspect of being a good shepherd for your children, is to allow for that emotional grieving. And a little word about that is I've just met a family in my clinical practice that has gone through a divorce. And it's very, very clear, however, that the teenage daughter in this case has been able to process the divorce at a left brain verbal level, but at an emotional level, there has been absolutely no grief. As a matter of fact, there's been a lot that's happened that has been sort of shocking to her, and she's really just in survival mode. And so realize that kids can verbally tell you things about the divorce, but you really have to step back and ask yourself, has there been emotional grieving? And that is working through the shock, the anger, the fear, then having that flip into sadness, questioning, bargaining, and then acceptance, and then determining if that acceptance is bitter or if that acceptance is healing, and then beyond that, thriving and then growing much stronger. So remember, that is also possibly going on if a child is showing a lot of anger. So then more context that we need to look at is, what about medical issues? And that also means mental health issues. So does your child have ADHD, some type of impulsivity? And then are their medications optimized? And then have they been taking them? What's the level of supervision, and has that played a role as well? And then, do you have a developmentally normal child? Are they typically good at expressing themselves and then connecting their behaviors with emotions? Is this anger and violence really out of character for them? So those are some things that you really want to look at as well as you're trying to sort out what's going on with your kiddo. So as you begin to problem solve what's going on, I really encourage you to check your own mindset and realize that connection-based parenting is not a kind of just a all nurture type situation. It is a situation where the parents are the leaders, but that is not done in win-lose or lose-win fashion. It's a win-win type of leadership where the parent is the captain of the ship, but there's always a win for the child. And that means that child feels known and valued, even if they have done something like have a violent outburst. So are you in a mindset that is patient and kind and able to set boundaries that you need to? And so all of the context questions that we just went over should generate a lot of curiosity in your mind. But if the children have experienced a lot of win-lose type parenting, whereas if you detect something is off and then you get very emotional and raise a voice and sort of come across very strong to them, then they are going to be in sort of a lose-win mindset and just kind of be waiting for the danger to pass. And that's not a great situation for them to be open and honest about what's really going on. And if you come to the conclusion that that has been the dynamic in the family for quite a while, then a therapist, family therapist in particular, is going to be very helpful at bridging that gap in terms of pivoting the parenting style into a connection-based parenting style. And by the way, don't feel bad. This is one of the ways that intergenerational trauma gets passed down in families, is through win-lose parenting. And so it is a very tough skill to learn connection-based parenting, especially in the midst of a divorce situation where chaos has just sort of taken over in some cases. So just remember again that you are going to try to be this connection-based parent, this leader, this win-win, patient and kind parent who is trying to get a sense of the pain, the hurt, the shame that's underlying a lot of this violence. And so if you are in a mindset where you can then feel the compassion and then balance it properly with boundaries that protect you and other people in the home, you are very much ready to take the next step and begin to address this with your kiddo. And so what I'm trying to say, once you kind of approach the kids and after this type of thing, if things are calmed down, I'm giving you fair warning that you may encounter resistance, especially if that situation of win-lose parenting has been in place. The because I said so type of parenting. And so remember that you cannot talk your way out of things that you behaved your way into. So it is going to take a while for the kids to get a sense of what that's new connection-based parenting that you're trying to work on. And so, like I said, it's understandable and very common in homes that parents get into a very win-lose mindset. But let's kind of quickly go over parenting strategies. And the first is authoritative. And this is this proper balance of nurture and structure and supervision. And it's very sensitive to the heart of the child and balances their needs for standards and to facilitate relationships in the home. But chances are, in a divorce situation, the things have been less than healthy, and there might be a combination of close and chaotic, which is sort of very little structure and an awful lot of nurture, but then a lot of high emotions. So that's one form of parenting. Then you have a overly structured parenting. So that's going to be kind of the my way or the highway parenting, and that's authoritarian. And then you have sort of distant, where the parents kind of they keep their distance from the kids, where the kids feel like that they're not known and valued, but then they have a lot of rules that they must deal with. So there's blends of these parenting styles out there. And if the kids have experienced some of these non-ideal parenting styles, they're going to be particularly hesitant to give vulnerable details about how they're feeling when violence has cropped up. So what do you do? Well, if you have a general sense of this idea that this win-lose parenting style has been there, when you're trying to pivot into a new win-win connection-based parenting style, it's okay to apologize for things that you've done in the past. Maybe I have not always listened to you properly. You've not had a chance to express yourself safely, and I really am trying to change. And I really apologize for making you feel that way for so many years. And so I'm trying to learn this new connection-based parenting, and it's going to hopefully allow you to feel more known and safe to discuss what it is that you need to feel like. So I'm hoping we can start now and realize that what just happened really tells me that you have a lot of strong emotions. And so let's kind of move forward in the further kind of scripting of what to say in this type of a situation. So I'm just going to go through a bit of a script here. And remember, we have a 13-year-old boy who has just had a violent outburst. We've had to lock ourselves in a room while he calmed down. And now things are a little bit more calm. In this case, we have not had to call the police. And then here's a sample script. And anytime I do this, please realize that you can make this your own. So, buddy, there was a lot of emotion there. I just want you to know that I'm not mad. I'm very concerned. And I really want to understand these emotions so we can move forward together. I love you, and I'm not going anywhere. So please just help me understand the pictures and feelings that led up to this. And it's okay if you're blaming me for the divorce. That's really natural and understandable. And it's okay to be blaming me for a lot of other things. So just help me understand what's going on and the different aspects of this that triggered you, okay? So let's break down, that script that I just talked to you. And so the first part is, wow, there's a lot of emotion here. And so this is a very non-judgmental way to acknowledge that emotion. And a lot of kids, if something like this has happened, they've just compounded their shame. They understand that they just had a blow up and that they've probably hurt you or done something else. So to reassure them that you're not just sitting there angry, but to properly frame how you're feeling and the fact that you're very concerned, and that you're more curious than judgmental, that this phase of things requires you to be curious, because if they detect that you're going to just use what they say and then start lecturing them, they're going to clam up. And so when we look at, so we can move forward together, again, that's implying this idea of win-win. They obviously have a lot on their heart that they need to get out, and you want to be able to guide them through that. And realize, though, in some cases that you may not be the adult that can do that. So that's where therapy and family therapy is very, very important. Reminding them that you love them, that your love for them will not change no matter what, even if they're violent or anything like that, and that you're not going anywhere. Okay? So again, you're asking them to help you understand what feelings led up to this. And then they may be and it's okay to kind of prompt them, they may be very stuck in the fact that they are blaming you for the divorce or other things that have happened. And it's okay to acknowledge that for them, because it lets them know that they can say that, and hopefully you won't get more upset by that. That's one of their biggest fears, especially in divorce, is to add on to your emotional burden. And that's why you really have to be kind of in a healthy space to do this. And so remember, checking your mindset is helping to determine if you are the best person to help them through this or not. And if it's not you, hopefully it's a trusted, neutral party, like a parent or grandparent for them or something like that. And then you can acknowledge that you're guessing. You do not, even though you're kind of trying to, guess about what they might be upset about, you want to acknowledge the fact that they may have other thoughts and feelings, and that those are okay, and that you're relying on them to bring forth what it is that they're feeling. Okay? So what if after this they still don't talk? Without being upset or angry, connection-based parenting ideally says to permit the silence, but you can stay in the same room. So in other words, you can express your desire to speak, but allow this on their time. So this is, again, you showing dignity for their ability to craft the conversation. So ideally, if you guys could stay in the same room and say, you know what, if you need to be silent for a little while, that's okay. And if they ask to go to their room, I would allow this, but try to do it without media. That will give them unhelpful distractions. Now, this is a double-edged sword. Social media might actually be how they can calm down and process when they're checking their Snapchats or their Instagrams or TikTok videos or something like that. It is a way for them to kind of like de-stress for a little bit. But if they've had a history of using their media poorly, you have to take that into account. Because the last thing that you really want to do in a crisis is to remove kids from some of their social supports. So encourage them to like read a book as opposed to being on just mindless social media. But remember that it is a connection to their friends, and they may need that to help them process. So it just depends on how you guys have dealt with social media in the past. But it might also be a mixed message if you are trying to build a connection with them, but then taking away their phone at the same time might feel like that harsh win-lose type punishment. So just balance the use of that social media very, very cautiously. So remember with connection-based parenting that you're balancing nurture with structure, and that structure means that you as a leader have determined what's coming next, and it relies on your ability to do that. And remember, if they ask for something, realize that they are trying to advocate for themselves. And if they ask for something that seems really out of like logically doesn't make sense, just ask them to help you make sense of it. So how does this help the situation? I want to understand if they want to go outside for a walk or something like that. But um, always maintain this idea of being curious. And so realize that they are not going to be great at advocating for themselves for a while. So that's where the extreme patience comes in. And I really just like this. Help me understand how this helps you. And so that's different than this kind of like, you're making a terrible demand and I don't understand it. Just kind of realize how you come out. So if at all possible, accommodate what they're asking, but you can also share their feelings without making it a power play. In our particular case, this child, when things were when things were being mended, mom wanted them to eat together at the table. She could see that that was good for their connection. Well, he wanted to eat in his room. And my advice to her at that time was, go ahead and let him eat in his room. But you can also say, look, it's totally okay for you to eat in your room. I understand where you're coming from. I see us eating together at the table as something that is helpful and brings us together. But for now, it's okay for you to eat in your room. So she was giving him permission, being the leader, and allowing him to eat in his room, but sharing her good intention for the table. And after a few minutes, he actually came down and joined them at the table. So sometimes you just need to let the air out of their kind of this rebellious, I need to do it my way kind of thing. And that understanding, that giving someone a sense that they're known and understood is very, very important in all of this. And so balancing the listening and granting the request helps them feel this being supported and known. And that's what helps fight the shame and allows them to kind of progress through this anger, shock, fear, part of their grief and expectational grieving, and get it into the parasympathetic sadness, questioning, bargaining, so to speak. And so her gentle direction that she wanted him to come back to the table, but was very much understanding his need to be by himself, that was crucial. So however the situation arises in your own home, realize that that is an okay thing to do. So the closing comments on our child today is that he had experienced some time in respite care. And after we put a lot of these principles into place and mom started to see kind of a rapid improvement in his behavior, including he plays music, and kind of invited her in to hear the music that he's been playing, she really began to feel the connection with him again. And once she had processed a lot of things, she said, "You mean I just need to be Jesus to my children?" And the quick answer was yes, of course. And remember that Jesus, as the Good Shepherd, goes to rescue the lost sheep, and they know his voice, and they will respond to it. And that voice is a loving voice. And remember, the first two words that describe love are patient and kind. And then the Good Shepherd will pick up the sheep and to carry them on the path back towards safety. So we remember that the children, they process the divorce differently than the parents do, and they eventually will come to see it probably as you do, but remember that their processing of it is going to be different, and it's important to be curious about how they're processing it. And you don't have to disagree with them in the moment. You can just be aware of how they're seeing something and then plan how to respond later. That's totally okay. So in journal time, remember that journal is a private place to lament and vent about the divorce and things that are happening, including children that are having really tough emotional responses. So here are some prompts that I want you to think about when it comes to the journaling. So first one is, although I wish it was different, my child or children experienced blank during the marriage and then even after during the divorce. And so this is, the blank is any negative interaction patterns that they saw frequently between the parents. And this could be silence, or this could be fighting and violence and something like that. And then we can overcome these things with curiosity, patience, kindness, structure, routines, and fun. So the next journal prompt is journal with a win-win mindset, a realistic picture of how the home will function. Like, what are the routines? What are are you going to have family meetings, which I encourage? And what are the basic blessings for the homes? Not the commandments for the homes, but how do we treat one another? And that means that we can give ourselves solitude. We can give ourselves some time to process on our own, but then we also need to process together in community. So take your journal time to kind of look at the past, but then also to plan for the future. All right, so for our Lectio for today is going to be Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And so as I read that through, the meditation that I have for parents is, how are you going to become peacemakers? How are you going to learn deeper and more robust skills for being a peacemaker? And that starts with your children. And so hopefully you've seen that the connection-based parenting, where you humbly kind of listen to them and try to leave this kind of win-lose parenting style, if that's been one that you've been using, behind, and adopt more of a patient, kind, listening type of structure. So we're going to focus on the words here. Blessed are the peacemakers, and they will be then connected to God. So I'm going to read this through the second time and then reflect on how this will specifically relate to you moving forward in the divorce. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And, feel free as we're going through Lectio to pause at each reading to see how you're going to respond internally. So visualize a few ways that you can be a better peacemaker, and that might include advocating for yourself better, for creating win-wins, and that includes wins for you as well. Sometimes parents are actually trapped in a lose-win where you're not winning at all. So this third reading through, how are you going to respond to becoming a peacemaker? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. And then once you have it fully in your mind on how you are going to be a peacemaker, rest now as I read it the fourth time through, like someone who is just sitting down and laying with God, looking up at the sky, feeling the sun. So blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. So thank you again for joining us for one of our episodes, and I hope this gives you some ways to process and think through the dynamics that have been set up in the home, both before and after the divorce. And as always, I would love in your comments to give me more questions so that I can plan future episodes and make sure that they are impactful for the situations that you are dealing with. So, dear Heavenly Father, despite our chaos, Lord, we know you are in control. We are so blessed that you are our good shepherd and tree of life. Thank you for giving us your wisdom and love so that we can in turn give them to our children. We see your patience and kindness, and we seek to live this out for our children. And when they are impatient and use strong language or even violence, help us see past their words to their hearts and see that they are just trying to survive. Help us speak to our lost sheep so that they can hear and trust us like we trust you, so that they will heed our words and advice and encouragement. Grant us the wisdom to balance love for you, for them, and ourselves. Help us spot parental alienation syndrome and make us aware, if we have been part of it, that we can end it. Help us apologize to our children and be better shepherds and trees of life for them. Seeing our humanity and flaws is okay, and watching us struggle and will help them grow and do the same. So keep us safe, Lord. Help us handle stressful situations with grace and walk with us as we reconnect with our children after rough, angry patches. Help us fix our eyes on building a better future for our children with your help walking alongside us, as it should have been from the beginning. Help fix us to the hope rather than the shame that we naturally fight. Lord, you are the reason we hope. Your wisdom and love move mountains, and our ears are open to you, Lord. Grant us the wisdom to raise our children as trees of life and good shepherds. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you for spending time with Little Pieces Club Ministries. Like I said, send us questions, and please have a blessed week.